Hello and welcome to the West Yorkshire Football Show, and we're discussing all things Leeds United with our special guest and friend of the show, Tom Carnduff from Sporting Life. Tom, thank you so much for joining us again.
No worries, all good.
Please pop a like on the video and don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Okay, so let's crack on, Tom. We're a few days into July and Leeds United have made 3 signings so far. Lucas Nemecha, Jacoby Jol and Sebastian Browne. What have you made of these signings as an initial trio of arrivals?
As initial trio, yeah, perfectly happy with them. From a Leeds perspective, I think one of the 3 is only really going to be a starting player, if we're honest, in Jacoby Jol. He obviously brings a significant amount of kind of strengths, the kind of aerial presence that he is at the back, the fact that he's captained Udinese a fair few times last season as well. Real presence to the back line, which they need. Sebastian Browne was kind of someone I was familiar with, having watched German football, and for the price, bulking out the squad, he'll be perfectly fine for a 3rd, 4th choice centre-back, however that plays out. And Lucas Nemecha as well is, again, one, a bit like Browne. There's obviously the fitness issues there, but on a free transfer to become effectively the 3rd choice striker, you probably imagine, it's fine. So yeah, it's what's needed. They need to bulk out the squad a little bit, and this is the right way to go about it.
Yeah, indeed. Sunderland, Tom, we've got to talk about Sunderland. They've signed Noah Siddiqui, it looks like. They've got Habib Diarra from what feels like right under our noses. What did you make of how they just swooped in and got those deals done? Because obviously it sent a portion of the Leeds fan base into a bit of a meltdown.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think it's inevitable that teams are going to be looking at, you're going to have multiple teams looking at the same players, particularly in the Premier League. And, for Sunderland as well, would have done their own analysis on what they think you need to stay up. Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? I think the general narrative is that Sunderland were happier to pay more than what Leeds valued the player at. And obviously Leeds' PSR position is, I wouldn't say difficult, but they're obviously, got to be a bit clever with how they do things, particularly for sort of the amount of signings that they're probably going to look to make. So yeah, it's an interesting kind of pattern that's emerged. It's a few players, but by all accounts, Leeds weren't as close to those players as perhaps we were previously initially led on to believe. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I've not really bought into it too much in this kind of Sunderland swooping in and taking Leeds targets sort of thing. I think it's names that were on a long list of players, and they felt appropriate to go in and get them. So yeah, by all accounts, strong players who are leaders as well, which I think you need in the Premier League. We'll just kind of have to see how they go there. But yeah, it's been an interesting one. I think the battle between Sunderland and Leeds, two clubs who, if they could stay up this season, will significantly benefit in the long term when kind of the expected PSR rules change. So yeah, I think just how it's going to be, Sunderland want to do their business earlier and are happy to spend a little bit more to get targets, whereas Leeds are going to be patient. And as we've seen for the past 2 seasons under the current ownership, patience has paid off. So yeah, I don't think it's something worth panicking about at this stage.
Are you surprised by how quickly Sunderland are acting and kind of the levels that they seem to be going to at the moment?
Potentially, yeah. Although I think, they had a more of a gap to make up on Leeds and Burnley last season. It's just how the table worked out. Of course, Leeds and Burnley ended up being in kind of a little league of their own. 2 teams who finished on 100 points. You've got to do a bit more making up on that. And in fairness to them, they're showing that they're committed to doing it. That obviously all the teams will have done their own analysis. Leeds certainly have, and theirs has come back. You need physicality and presence, and Sunderland are willing to spend big. So yeah, in my head, and it's not just a pro Leeds stance, it's just the nature of it with them coming up from the playoffs, that they were always probably going to be the most vulnerable to going back down. Their early intent is that they have no intention of doing that. And fair enough to them, in a way that from Leeds' own perspective, they obviously want others to struggle to try and stay up, but it would help if that kind of recent trend of 3 going up, 3 coming straight back down is broken. And Sunderland are very keen to ensure that's not going to be them. But again, yeah, they had more of a gap to make up. So naturally, they're going to spend a little bit more. And in fairness, the business they've done very early looks good, and it's made people sit up and pay attention, which is, I suppose, exactly what you want when you're coming into it as the underdogs of the 3 teams that came up.
Yeah, indeed. So Leeds United, 3 players have come in, but it still feels like there's a lot of work to do. I actually thought we might have had more starters by now, and by starters, I'm looking at kind of Borneau and Nemecha as kind of more squad players, and Bijol as an out and out starter. But what do you make of the speed at which Leeds are getting business done? I mean, considering kind of pre-season kicks in kind of 7th of July, Farke made the comment about wanting the bulk of the squad in by then. I mean, it feels like there's a lot of work that Leeds have got to do in, not too great an amount of time, really.
Yeah, but then equally, it's, things go on in the background, and Leeds don't really let on to how quickly they can, or how far down the line they are on certain moves. The most recent one, Sebastian Bornau, Lucas Nemecha, were 2 examples of players that, in terms of the public knowledge, the interest wasn't even reported interest, and then a few hours later they're arriving. Joe Rothwell, who's obviously gone to Rangers, was the exact same last summer. Nothing was said about him joining Leeds, and then 3 hours later he's suddenly there holding up the shirt and has done all the media stuff, and it's basically been let on that he's coming because the deal was already done. So they've got a really good track record of working quietly behind in the background and then getting deals done relatively quickly when they need to. And we've now had 2 seasons of that experience, particularly in the summer window. So from my perspective, it's not panic stations. It's the 3rd of July. You obviously want to get players in as quickly as you can into pre-season and as early as you can into pre-season so they can really get up to speed. But the track record shows that if that needs to happen, it can happen, and they're clearly working behind the scenes to get things done. So for me, it's not a huge concern at this stage. You're still very early into pre-season, and the players they're signing, I think there's, you look back at Bielsa and his signings, and it was a bit different in the Premier League. But obviously, the caliber of players that they're targeting are top level players who can slot in relatively easily. It's not going to take a huge amount of time to bed them into kind of a system. So, yeah, it's not a panic point. It's the 3rd of July, plenty of time. We're obviously in a new PSR year, which is significant in terms of what you can spend and what you can't. And yeah, plenty of time. I think it's the frustration of seeing other clubs, Sunderland being the one because they're signing some of the players that Leeds were targeting, that panic sets in. But it just doesn't make an awful lot of sense to do that at this point.
No. What do you think's more key for Leeds at the moment? Is it goalkeeper? Is it striker, midfield? Where do you see as the kind of most pressing concern when you're looking at that Leeds team?
Anywhere as long as they're over 6'4", I think is the pattern that we're going with. Yeah, that is a tricky one. I think the goalkeeper one's interesting because I guess you're at an expectation where there is going to be a new goalkeeper on opening day, whoever that may be. There's probably going to be a new striker on opening day as well. It's just the kind of the formational change that potential that I found interesting, that we saw it in pre-season last summer. Farke attempted or looked at a back 3 style system. We're now bulking out the centre back core is what they would say, and they've got 4 out and out centre backs there, a defensive midfielder who can play there, so you've sort of got 5 options if you wanted to go to a back 3, a 4-3-3, a more defensive minded one when you look at the kind of style of midfielders that they're looking at, whether they're going to play 2 defensive midfielders and Tanaka as sort of the number 8 in front of that, which kind of then makes it difficult when you work out exactly where the pressing matters are of where they're going to go. Yeah, it's tough. I suppose in terms of the actual squad, a left back is needed because they don't have one currently. And then I suppose if you said on opening day, Joel Peru is going to be starting up front, and he's earned the right to at least try and prove himself because of his golden boot, even with a lower tally than we're usually seeing last season. There would probably be some concern. So you would say, yeah, goalkeeper, striker would be the two, just on numbers, but it's a much of a muchness in a way, I think, to me. I'd be more targeting the areas just where you don't have any depth at all, which would obviously be the left back position because of Firpo going, and Struijk could play there, but you don't want to be in the Premier League where you're using players like Ampadu last season at centre back. Well, he can play there, so we'll play him there. You need to get the starters in, and if the depth's not there, I think that's where you've got to be targeted.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you solve a problem like Jack Harrison? What are we going to do with this guy? I mean, obviously, Everton decided they didn't want to kind of take up a deal with him. His reputation with Leeds fans, is pretty much on the floor. We know all the reasons why. Doesn't seem to be that much interest in him. Are we just going to have to bide our time to get this guy out, or is there a chance actually that he could be in our Premier League squad for the season?
That is a tricky one, unless he goes to left back and you kind of use him there. But yeah, that is tough. I suppose you look at the last season, the track record of trying to integrate loanees back in was there. Max Verber, of course, unsuccessfully. Brendan Aronson, more successfully in terms of the amount of minutes he got, but in terms of fan opinion, I think it's jury's out on how successful that return was. It just feels with Harrison that there's a bit more sort of, the bitterness is sort of there a bit more, which is going to make it incredibly difficult. And I don't think a lot of people will be won over. The only way you're going to win people over was the exact same thing that Aronson had to do. And I suppose to an extent Verber, but you're obviously given his position on the pitch, and that's to contribute with goals and assists. And in the Premier League, during his time at Leeds, during his time at Everton, has Harrison been prolific enough, been creative enough to put in the style of performances that are going to win people over? The track record says no, based on the last 5-6 years, however long he's been playing in the Premier League. So yeah, it's tough to see how he's then bedded back in and successfully bedded back in. It wouldn't surprise me if he features in a pre-season friendly or is involved in some extent to pre-season, but you just don't. It's hard to tell without knowing exactly what the player wants, because there'll be European teams, there'll be teams in top European leagues. We've seen the Bundesliga has been kind of a happy hunting ground for like Rasmus Christensen, has had a very good season in the Bundesliga. Robin Koch, very good season in the Bundesliga. And whether teams will kind of look at that and potentially take a chance on him. Yeah, I think I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if he's involved to some extent in pre-season. I just can't see there being a level of performance there with him that is going to win people back over, which means that whatever way it comes about, it's just got to be an exit this summer.
What do you think of some of the other potential exits then? I mean, obviously we've got a kind of cluster of young players, haven't we, like Gellart and Greenwood, and then, you've got your elder statesman like Bamford, who's obviously on a high wage. There doesn't seem to be much kind of chatter about things happening. Do you expect a couple of those to go, all three to go, or any others that you think will be heading out the exit door?
Yeah, I think so. I think the PSR figure on the numbers was around 65-ish million, I think, on the maths, and the noises from Leeds were there's around 100 million to spend, which means you're obviously going to have to make up that gap somehow. Obviously, 7-ish of it, I think, was made up by Rasmus Christensen, so there are going to be other players who have to go, which obviously won't command a huge fee, but when you kind of combine them for a few million here and there, it does add up. Yeah, the players you mentioned there, I think obviously it's clear that kind of Greenwood's probably not going to be involved if Farke didn't want him for the Championship side. Same with Gellart, who had to go. Although obviously a Hull return's a bit difficult given the news about their potential transfer embargo that's been reported tonight. And Bamford as well as a wage saver. It does feel inevitable that there are players like that who are going to go, and we're going to see Max Verber go to Werder Bremen probably in the next couple of days. So there's another one that's departed, but they've already replaced him. So yeah, players like that. And I'm not too sure on the actual starting players who figured quite a lot last year. I think the obvious one would probably be Matteo Joseph, who I'm not sure I'd want to sell at this point. There's just something about him that I think raw is probably the right word, isn't it? Quite young, quite lively, and we saw in flashes when he was trying to force his way back into the team that there is a really capable player there. It just didn't work out when he then got obviously the burden of being the starting striker. So I don't think, by all accounts, they're that keen to sell unless the price was obviously massive. So he'd certainly be one. But then obviously, if the PSR perspective comes into it, and you want to free up some funds, then naturally he'd be one you look to. So yeah, he's probably the most interesting outgoing. But I can't exactly think of, unless you can, any other first teamers who there'd be a huge scramble for, and in the nicest way possible, because they're a very good team. They've got very good players, Tanaka, etc. Very good. It's not a lot that jump out to me that don't give you that sort of Somerville style scramble that we'd expected last summer. It's a bit of a strange situation, but obviously a positive because you can keep the players that you want.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, yeah, we don't seem to have those kind of, Archie Gray, Rutter, Somerville, like you mentioned, and that could be the difference this summer. In terms of incomings, then, Tom, who are you excited about? Which links are kind of whetting the appetite for you at the moment?
As a traditionalist fan of direct football, anyone again who's the 6'4" and above category is really kind of getting me going. I think the goalkeeper one's particularly interested. A number of the links that have been there. Finn Darman was a name I kept hearing, and I'm not in the know enough anymore, but that was a name that kept repeating at Augsburg, which does make sense to me because he had a very, very good season last year. As you can question certain European top leagues and what the caliber of that is, but he had a very good season with Augsburg. By all accounts, wants to come and play in England. So he could be one that does have real potential, I think, to kind of finally provide some stability in that goalkeeping position, which is long overdue. But in terms of the others, I mean, it's not a huge deal of links out there now that players have seemingly been stolen by Sunderland. Rodrigo Muniz, I mean, if they can somehow get that done, that is a real kind of, I don't want to say the word statement, but a real kind of marker of what they're looking to do now they're up in the Premier League. So yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky because, again, everyone just keeps getting snapped up and names, unless you can remember a few. It just seems to be that there's not a great deal.
Do you think we need? I was going to say, do you think we need a statement signing? Do you think we need something now that's going to excite us a little bit? Do we need to get, Muniz or someone like that that's going to be like, oh, wow, Leeds are really making a go of it? Or do we just kind of plug away as we have been doing? Or should we go for that kind of naming headlight signing?
Yeah, I think the expectation was you've got 6 or 7 probably incoming this summer, which is about right, maybe, considering it was a team who got 100 points. And obviously, I know teams have done that and gone up and been unsuccessful, but as long as you got a bit more pragmatism about it, you'll be okay. So you think that that's 3 of them are in. The total spend of those 3 was around 20 million. That's in theory left about 80 odd for 4 or 5 other players, depending on the opportunities. So I think it's inevitable that you are going to get some. That you can't do everything, and it's not saying that players are obviously judged completely on a low transfer fee, that they're all going to be bad because they didn't cost much. Tanaka being a good example, of that last season. But it does feel like you need a solid spine. You need a solid spine of a team. Yeah. And ultimately what Leeds are lacking and have lacked since Bamford's prolific kind of campaign of the first promotion season is a striker. And if you want to get a good striker and a striker who will guarantee you goals, you need someone who's going to at the very least, hit double figures to give you any chance of survival. That is going to cost big money. It seems inevitable that a decent outlay will go on a striker because that's just the way the market commands, but it's what your team needs. And I think just by the nature of the position, that's the statement signing that would get people excited. And I think we've seen with the intent for Rodrigo Muniz and the fees they were willing to pay, that there is, a willingness to do that. So yeah, a statement signing, inevitable. I think if they can get it done soon, naturally it'll relax people a little bit in terms of the panic around the perceived lack of signings. But yeah, seems inevitable. And to me, it just seems like it will be a striker.
Yeah, indeed. Let's hope so. Fingers crossed. There's going to be more teams than ever in Europe in the Premier League this season. Yeah, we've seen for the last 2 years that the promoted teams have all been relegated, and it feels to me like there's an extra push now from these teams that have been promoted, Sunderland and Burnley included, to kind of buck that trend. It's all, these teams will be hyper aware of this, the fact that the previous 2 promoted teams have gone straight back down. Where do you see Leeds stacking up in the Premier League next season?
Yeah, it's tough when the fixtures came out and we were kind of running numbers and things like that. I initially had Leeds on 44 points, which is perfectly fine. I think the last 2 seasons, yeah, I think the last 2 seasons have kind of made us sort of forget how normal that is. That is just a completely reasonable tally for a newly promoted team to get. So when I look back on it, 44 points before the last 2. A promoted team had achieved at least 44 in each of the previous 6 seasons, Leeds being one of them where they got 59. So it was a perfectly normal tally to get. It's just that the past 2 seasons have seen, I mean, probably of all of them, Luton were relatively close to staying up. The others not so much. And it's kind of made us forget that actually it's a very realistic thing to achieve. It's just the gap is seemingly getting a little bit bigger. But as you said, the Europe thing is huge. The Europe thing is absolutely massive. I don't think Leeds could have benefited from it slightly as much, but equally then, playing a lot of the bigger teams, December, where there's obviously a lot of European football, into January with the expanded Champions League, is naturally going to be a slight benefit to them. So yeah, I haven't looked back on it, but in the kind of weeks that followed the fixture release or the days that followed it, 44 was the tally marker I had Leeds at, which is, considering they got 100 points the season before, it feels a fairly natural thing for them to do. It just obviously comes down to the recruitment.
Yeah, indeed. Tom, absolute pleasure chatting to you again. Hopefully we'll speak again before the season kicks off. And thanks to everyone who's been watching. Let us know in the comments what you think of Leeds' transfer business so far. And if you enjoyed it, please like the video and subscribe for more from the West Yorkshire Football Show. See you next time. Thank you.